What is the formula for squandering $118 million? First, you need a project. In this case, the rebuilding of a burnt-out wing in a hospital. Then you need a totally inexperienced team comprising a project consultant, a project manager, and 2 main contractors. Then, to ensure there is no oversight, you elect 2 blind ministers of economic development who also happen to be prime ministers and ministers for finance. To balance out the equation, you commence work without the requisite planning approval. You ensure there is no defined scope of works, and you provide the project manager and team with a totally blank check. The coefficient of such a perplexing equation is the St. Jude reconstruction project. Tonight, we investigate what many have described as the greatest financial affliction which has plagued St. Lucia for 8 consecutive years. Untold Stories presents St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes. From the onset, the construction of this hospital was a comedy of errors. During World War II, the American government decided to build a hospital in the Santa Cruz Valley in Trinidad and Tobago. Bewilderingly, huge shipments of prefabricated material, plus a highly specialized team of workmen, engineers, plumbers, and electricians landed in St. Lucia and commenced construction on what was then the Beanfield Military Hospital. Midway through the construction process, it was discovered that the hospital was being built on the wrong island. A decoding mix-up caused the building material and personnel to be sent to Dawn, codename for St. Lucia, instead of Lorne, codename for Trinidad. The hospital was allowed to continue. After the war, the hospital was closed in 1947 and remained barren for 15 years until it was reopened by the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother on September the 5th, 1966. Sister Irma and her team managed this hospital until 1992, when it was officially handed over to the government of St. Lucia. Fast forward to 2009. 280 people are employed here. There are 447 live births annually. There are 2 operating theaters which perform 902 surgeries annually on the 66,000 residents which the hospital serves. The government of St. Lucia injects $17.5 million into the financial veins of St. Jude annually. Then, on the night of September the 9th, 2009, the unthinkable. The fire, which ignited from an electrical source in the technical wing of the hospital, quickly spread to several other parts of the building. Claudia Sudin, Joseph Shabatis, and Bernice Vigier perished in this disaster. In 2009, the United Workers' Party was in power. Stephenson King was the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, and he was also the minister responsible for the island's economic development.
The scene was almost chaotic. In fact, what was happening then was that nurses, doctors, hospital workers, citizens, residents from the community were all out attempting to rescue whoever they could have rescued and to bring them to a safe location.
Cyril Donnelly, a longtime friend of Prime Minister King, was summoned from the night of the fire.
When I reached here after I got a call from government official. This main building in front of us, which is called surgical, was completely on fire. And there were people all over the place.
When I heard the news, I could not sleep. So I had to get up and come up to St. Jude to see what's going on.
While the fire services were undertaking a tremendous job at controlling the fire, immediately the discussion was, what next?
You are the person in charge of finance at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You see the destruction, and now your mind starts to juggle back cost of putting it back up. Where is the country going to get the money?
Certainly. At the time when that happened, for me, cost wasn't a factor. I saw it as a necessity to expend whatever resources that would have been required to reconstruct the facility, to save lives, and to bring the services of St. Jude Hospital within the shortest possible time.
The 68-bed hospital was moved here to the George Odlum Stadium as a temporary measure as its management, healthcare officials and government strategized on the way forward. Within days of the disaster, the world came to our aid.
The Library Credit Union, at a brief presentation, handed over $100,000 to the institution for the purchase of an endoscopy equipment.
I think this contribution from the Red Caps at the airport is...
Lucia Toronto Association donated 18 high-quality long-term care hospital beds and some disposable medical supplies.
A check was presented to St. Jude's Hospital on Thursday.
Schools drained their piggy banks. Banks gave thousands, and Hess Oil gave generously. Within 3 weeks after the fire, Taiwanese Ambassador Tom Chu pledged his government's support. Despite the outpouring, consensus on the way forward seemed daunting. At the time, Dr. Stephen King and Percival MacDonald formed part of a high-powered delegation to spearhead the way forward.
They gave us three options. The option was you can stay here, it's going to cost you a little more, and you're going to be contained in your expansion. Or you can move to a new, start anew, it'll cost you a little less. The decision at that time was, listen, the community is already used to the hospital being here. Everybody understands St. Jude's. The community has built up already. The assessment of the building itself was sound, because the Americans, I mean, if you see the building, strong. So the decision, everyone took the decision from the political point all the way down that we would remain where we are. And of course, that would put certain limits to what you can do with the building. And that is where some of the technical problems came in. As time went on and we began assessing the other parts of the hospital, we realized that we're dealing with more than just a burnt-out wing, but rather a facility which infrastructure dated back to the 50s, 40s, 50s, and at that time needed some reconstruction or rehabilitation.
The story of the St. Jude reconstruction, in my view, is one of people with good intention, but sometimes the aspiration takes us a little too far ahead of ourselves, beyond our reach.
Say it so simple folks like me could understand. That was a big sentence.
That was a big sentence. I think that we all wanted to ensure that we got the best hospital that we could get in the South. And people, clearly we were all not only thinking technically, but also thinking somewhat emotionally, because the tragedy was fresh in our minds. And there was a lot of emotion, I think, that colored our decisions at the time as well.
During the 2010-2011 budget presentation, the leader of government business addressed the St. Jude reconstruction for the first time in Parliament. It is important to note that during that address, Stevenson King quoted the reconstruction cost at 2 million EC dollars with a construction period of 6 months and a reopening date of October 2010. The calendar spins from May 2010 all the way to October 2010, with not a shred of work being done at the St. Jude Hospital site. Like any good opposition, the SLP pounced with criticism.
For the government.
To date, the government cannot produce the evidence to show that there is major progress on the St. Jude's Hospital. Anyone will realize that the progress which the government promised by December of 2010 has not materialized.
And then, in a cruel stroke of fate, Hurricane Thomas knocked the wind out of St. Lucia, drowning her in $336 million of debt and further delaying work on the patron saint of lost causes. But alas, in January 2011, work commenced on the St. Jude Rehabilitation Project using Taiwanese funds to repair the burnt wing, with the clear intention of constructing a brand new hospital at an alternative location. You have the Taiwanese assistance. The company is Whole Year, correct?
Whole Year Construction.
Whole Year Construction. Yeah. You have plans designed for the rebuilding of that technical wing.
Mm-hmm.
Were these plans approved plans by the Ministry of Planning and the Development Control Authority?
Mm-hmm. Well, to answer your question, we were on the move. As to whether the Ministry of Planning or the DC had approved it, honestly, I can't tell you.
You are Minister of Finance.
I am Minister for Finance.
You're Minister of Finance,
yes,
and you're
yes.
Minister for
Mm-hmm.
Economic Affairs dealing
Mm-hmm.
with this project.
Yeah.
The number one thing is
Mm-hmm.
to go into any construction
Mm-hmm.
project, far less a construction project of
Mm-hmm.
that magnitude,
Mm-hmm.
you are the person holding the person responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So the first question is, did Whole Year, did your ministry and the project
Mm-hmm.
managers have approved plans to begin construction?
Let me just say this. You have a disaster on your hands, a facility has to be built. Your friends have come forward, they've brought you a design, the design is up to international standards. PAHO, WHO were brought on board immediately, they agreed to the plans, we moved.
Are you saying you did not have approved plans?
I'm not saying that we didn't have approved plans.
Are you
I'm telling
saying
you
that you
what
had
I
approved
did.
plans?
The technical details wasn't really mine. My function as Prime Minister and Minister for Finance was to get that facility off the ground. The officials within the Ministry of Finance and other departments dealt with all the details. But it is not for me to get involved in those details.
You were Minister of Finance. You were also Economic Affairs Minister. And as such, the buck started and stopped with you to ensure that the man on the ground built the wall in the correct place, the contractor above him did his job, and the project consultant was doing his job. The number one thing to have were blueprints.
The number one thing for me as Prime Minister was to get that job done. The responsibility of the technicians is to walk the footprints, walk the path that they understand must be walked. And that is the role.
So my
responsibility is to get the job done. I put everything in place to get the job done.
Essentially, there were no plans.
Whatever. You cannot say there were no plans.
There were no approved plans.
There were plans for the construction of the hospital.
Were they approved plans by the government of St. Lucia?
What did your investigation state?
My investigation stated that there were no approved
So why
plans.
did you ask me the question?
The question is lurking in the minds of St. Lucians. Why would my government go into such a project without approved plans?
Okay. Well, you see, in such situations, in the process, in the fog of war, you make decisions, and some decisions may not always be in keeping with the policies and principles.
Very well.
Okay? You take decisions, and your focus is to get that job done. That is what it is. But also, if at any time the planning department or the DCA realize that there are no plans, it's their responsibility to deal with it. It's their responsibility to deal with it. The function of the DCA, like the Ministry of Planning, doesn't change. It remains the same.
Whether it be government or private.
Once you know that the project is ongoing, the PAHO agreed, PAHO approved. You don't sit on your laurels and allow it to continue.
You chose project manager for this project, correct?
The project manager?
Yes.
The project was managed by the Ministry of Economic Development.
And the project manager was?
The project manager was an officer within the Ministry of Economic Development.
Why did you choose that particular officer?
It was not my choosing. The project manager within the Ministry of Economic Affairs had a mandate for managing certain projects. When the fire occurred, that responsibility was handed over to that project officer.
Do you think that
there was no specific reason to select a particular project manager?
Do you think that project manager was the most suitably qualified person to
handle
the project of that magnitude?
I think the project manager did a fantastic job up to the point when I left as Prime Minister.
Guy Joseph was a member of the Stephenson King-led cabinet in 2009.
I was very uncomfortable with the project manager, and I did voice openly my concerns about the choice of project manager given what I had learned that had transpired on the previous projects, and I stated my serious objections to the then appointed project manager. And I was not the only one who was opposed to it. There were a number of other cabinet colleagues who were at the time opposed to the choice of person to be the project manager.
If you and your cabinet colleagues disapproved of Shanta King, why do you think the leader of government business went ahead against your wishes?
That is a question you would have to ask the leader of government business. I cannot state all of the reasons. I don't think it was a choice of just the Minister of Finance at the time. I think technocrats within the Ministry of Finance was advising to go in that particular direction.
Why did you choose Halcro Construction Company?
Halcro Construction Company was selected again by the Ministry of Finance. They looked at a number of companies based on their past experiences, based on the reputation, the credibility, their own performance, and we concluded that we should go with Halcro.
From your research, sir, did Halcro build any hospitals in the lifespan of this firm?
I cannot attest to the fact that Halcro built any hospitals. What I can attest to the fact is that Halcro has a number of successful projects that they have implemented the world
Buildings?
over. A number of projects they have executed throughout the world.
My research shows that Halcro has not built one hospital to date. Halcro has not built a hotel to date.
With the responsible guidance of PAHO, WHO, we expected to have a hospital built to the standard that we're looking for.
And your project consultant was Halcro?
The consultant was Halcro, yes. And remember, we're not building a new hospital. We were renovating or reconstructing what existed before.
It is then the responsibility of the project consultant to come up with the designs and to pass on these designs to a contractor who will execute the designs as per PAHO standards and accreditation standards. Between 2009...
The designs were done by the Taiwanese. They were reviewed, and those designs were approved with the involvement of PAHO.
Okay. Now that's the first leg of the project, which was executed by Holdier, and the contractor was Cyril Donnelly.
Contractor was Cyril Donnelly.
Yes. Second question is, why did you single-handedly choose Cyril Donnelly to work with Holdier Construction to execute that project?
A number of contractors were considered. A number of contractors were presented, rather. We looked at contractors who had a track record of efficiency and capability. and quality of work. And Cyril Donnelly stood out as one of the better ones. I'm not saying he's the best, but I'm saying he was one
from your
of the better
research,
ones.
have any experience in building hospitals?
Well, I guess if we need to go along those questions and to ask who had experience in building hospitals, etc., we'd probably have to go to the United States and get a contractor with the expertise. You're talking about a hospital that got burnt on a night, a nation in panic, and the need to have a new facility built to meet the needs of the people. Okay? And it was to rebuild that facility in accordance with the footprints that existed. And therefore, to decide that to rebuild a facility that existed, almost in its entire, its identical setup, I'm not too sure that you really want to talk about who has experience, who doesn't have experience.
To build a facility of that nature, considering where we were, your plans to improve it for the people of the South, and considering our meager resources at the time.
Remember,
you as Minister of Finance, it is your responsibility to find the roundest pegs to put in that round hole. And in your mind, Cyril Donnelly was the roundest peg, correct?
I agree with you that we did examine a number of contractors. We came up with a contractor that we believed, based on his experience, his proven track record, that he was a suitable candidate for the job.
Many people believe that Cyril Donnelly was hand-delivered a project worth, to him, $48 million, simply because he was a United Workers' Party supporter, and he had been for many years as the purse of the United Workers' Party. They believe that he was hand-delivered that project. You as Prime Minister...
I wouldn't agree with you, sir. I wouldn't agree with you, sir. I wouldn't agree with you. I told you exactly the basis upon which Cyril Donnelly was selected.
By April 14th, 2011, the scope of works had changed once again, and the milking of the national purse had officially commenced. Further to this plea of $23.7 million, Stevenson King assured St. Lucia that this project would be completed by March 2012.
We will construct a new...
Coming up in the series, more money is borrowed, and Cyril Donnelly is fired. To fully understand what went wrong and who was ultimately responsible at St. Jude, you must read the Constitution of St. Lucia, Section 69. It states, where any minister has been charged with responsibility for any department of government, he or she shall exercise general direction and control over the department, and subject to such direction and control, every department of government shall be under the direct supervision of a public officer, whose office is referred to in this Constitution as the office of the Permanent Secretary. In a construction contract, you will have an employer, in this case, the government of St. Lucia. There will be an employer's representative, in this case, the project manager, Shanta King. Then, an engineering consultant who will supervise and approve the works. In this case, it was Halcro Construction, headed by Mandish Singh. His job was to produce a proper set of designs for the St. Jude Hospital and to supervise the works to ensure that only works done to specification are approved for payments. Cyril Donnelly was the main contractor, tasked with following instructions set by the engineering consultant in 2010. In the beginning, when Holyer was tasked with the rehabilitation of the burnt building, were there clear plans and guidelines as to what you should do, and were these plans approved?
To be honest with you, whole year, the time of whole year, it was more like the structures work. And every now and then, the consultant of the project would come with some sketch, which they'll ask you to put this partition in the morning. Let's say on a Monday or Tuesday morning, you'll get some work program. And by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, when you have set all your profile, starting to put blocks, you'll get a call, hold on that. And you will put to hold for at least 2 weeks. They'll send you somewhere else. While you are doing the other part where they give you to do, they'll call you and tell you demolish the first step that you have done. And that was something that was coming like every now and then. You will build a corridor for the emergency room, and you will ask to, after you have put all your interior wall behind it, we were asked to demolish it because it was too small. For instance, the dialysis building. We build up all the partitions. After we have put up all the partitions, then we were told that the partition was not to suit. Demolish it. But we are working according to specification. Whatever drawings they gave us, we were going according to the drawings that was given to us.
Who was giving you these drawings?
Colonel Emmanuel, Manjit Singh signed it. I was working under the supervision of Colonel Emmanuel and Manjit Singh as the consultant on site.
And Conrad Emmanuel he was the site engineer, correct?
At the time, he was not qualified as an engineer.
What was the role of Manjit Singh as it relates to directly dealing with your company from rehabilitation of the burnt wing?
He was representing HALCO as the site engineer, which you would see on site, I'll say, every 2-3 months, if not longer than that.
Are you telling us that Manjit Singh was not here on a weekly basis, ensuring that a project that he
was
getting...
No, he was not there, not even on a 3-month basis.
Viewers will find this difficult to believe because Manjit Singh was getting paid $49,500 a month to be the project consultant on this project. Are you telling us that on a weekly basis he was not here?
Not even on a monthly basis. Manjit Singh, I can counted the 3.5 years duration I was on site. I can count how many times Manjit Singh was on site on one hand, and it will not use all my fingers.
A project is a temporary group of activities designed to provide a unique final product, service, or result in a specified time and at a predetermined cost. By October 2011, the St. Jude reconstruction project was slowly garnering the hallmarks of a snowball of disaster. Did you visit that site?
I visited on several times.
What did you see?
As we visited, over time, we saw time and time again the need to make changes, or to, if I should say, add more tasks to the project.
We decided that we would have what you call private wards. There was a need for private wards. We know we could have done it in the private wards. Then you talk about the cafeteria. People always one thing, we would imagine we could get some funds from that. So all that came up, and gradually, as the technical people met, the own technical people from the hospital met, they came with some ideas, and we tried to incorporate that so that we have a well-balanced hospital and functional hospital.
Mr. McDonald, can you see the hallmarks right then of a disaster in waiting?
You were saying that gradually, as this was being done, everything was being, ideas were coming in. Mm-hmm. But from the very beginning, they had an idea, or the idea was there as to how that hospital would be maintained or how it would be developed.
But with any project of this magnitude, there must be a clear plan, financing, contractors.
Correct.
Everything must be sorted out and be approved by planning and the Development Control Authority just the same as you'll be building a house.
That's correct.
And post that period, then you have the execution phase. Hearing you tell it, there was a metamorphosis of the construction process.
Not necessarily, because basically, as I said, there was a technical committee that met at least once a month. Everything was being done, and as far as I'm concerned, the plans were being done, and they were brought forward. I would expect, and I know that they were presented to planning, and that is where I have a problem, as when I hear that planning knew nothing about it.
The decision was, well, let us change the asbestos roof. And then the thinking goes like this, well, if we're going to change the roof, why don't we look at renovating the hospital to make it more efficient and functional and modern? And then we say, oh yes, that's a good idea. And the medical schools are down there, so we want to incorporate medical education into the school. So why don't we build an auditorium so that we could have lectures and classes? And by the way, you know, we never really had a very good outpatient area, so why don't we can renovate the outpatient area? So when you get into these kinds of discussions, Dale, you can see how rapidly you begin to develop a far more grandiose plan, which is what we did.
There was scope creep.
There was scope creep.
Could you define scope creep, please?
The University of the West Indies should highlight St. Jude's as a case study in cost creep and project creep. I think it goes down in history as one of the most fascinating subject matter in the issue of scope creep, as well as cost creep. Right. This project was evolving and metamorphosis was occurring. It was shape changing from, I mean, if you talk about change a caterpillar into a butterfly, I think it reversed. It probably started off as a butterfly and ended up as a caterpillar. So you saw a project that was constantly moving and shaping and shifting. And as a result of that, it is reflected in what was seen in the budgetary allocations and in the budgetary presentations that we saw. It is impossible for 6 consecutive years a Minister of Finance can come to the people of St. Lucia and to say to them, this project is going to finish in this financial year. The question is, are those persons who have been assigned to the project, do they have the experience in building a hospital? And the answer would be a resounding no. That's the beginning, that's the genesis of the problem. That if I am the project manager and I have been given a proposal by a consultant for the construction of a hospital, I want to see the persons that have been outlined in the document, I want to see their levels of experience in that particular field. That is where the first mistake came about. Because as far as I'm aware, the principal players that on that particular project, they have never been involved in a hospital construction activity.
Building a hospital, how does it differ from building a conventional house or office structure?
As an experienced contractor, I'll tell you it is totally different. Because building a hospital, you have to know the size of the certain equipment that will be going in and have to pass through the doors. You have to know what direction, on which side you will have a wall and where you will have doors or windows. Building a hospital, it is not a place where you will do things at your choice. You have to do things at what's required. And because of that, I believe lack of certain experience from certain people, a person that was responsible for the project, quite a lot of building and demolish took place on site. For that matter, we had a pile of broken blocks, demolition materials that was so big. I was asked to take it out on site. It can be night and day, but there was a certain time they wanted me to get rid of it because they would be having site visit. It was that bad.
But Mr. Donnelly, how does an experienced contractor get into a situation where he builds a wall at the cost of taxpayers' money,
yes,
to specifications
Yes.
by the project consultant,
Right.
knocks it down, and who pays for the new wall to be installed?
Sometimes he'll just say, when he realized the amount, because most time demolition and rebuild were coming more than the cost of the actual work. The consultant will just turn my certificate to what he wants. I'm not paying this, I'm not paying that. Ask him for us to have a discussion for him to give me the reason. When I get a chance, I'll tell you. At one time, I have to wait for 7.5 months before I get paid. Yeah. And that was a strategy just to frustrate me on site so I could walk out.
But we have not answered the fundamental question. How can an experienced company like Halcro design walls in a specialized building like a hospital and then advise the contractor who put up the walls to knock it down? And at whose expense is it being rebuilt?
That I cannot answer. All I know, we was working according to what was asked to do, by specification.
The audit report conducted by FDL Consult says that your company was paid $48 million. Yes? True or false?
The money passed under my umbrella, which I never touch, most of it.
What does that mean?
All right. The $48 or $49 million that Halcro or the consultant or project manager consider that pass or paid through my company. Halcro was paying the 14 subcontractors under my umbrella directly. And only $12.something million Donnelly's Construction received out of the 48 or 49 million.
You've worked on many other projects before.
Yes.
Has it ever been like this?
Never before.
Why was there a deviation?
All because of these people were doing what they were not according to law. They were not working, hair was not running according to law.
The records indicate that it was Mandish Singh and Conrad Emmanuel of Halcro who engaged and instructed all subcontractors. Halcro also negotiated the cost and had a photocopied letter of authorization used to pay the subcontractors. The consequence of this unethical action is that the government of St. Lucia acquired large stocks of inventory and its associated risk, cost, and storage. Under Donnelly's contract, Biomedical International Corporation was paid $679,168. Bryce and Company, $411,000. Caribbean Metals Limited, $304,942. Converge Solutions, they got paid $893,384. Fargo Industries got over $3 million, while Energy and Advanced Control Technologies received $927,079. John Francis and Associates got $7 million. And there was even $128,000 paid to Jean-Pierre Laurent for the landscaping of the St. Jude site. Cyril Donnelly received 5% of every invoice which was paid. The question is, why? Mr. Donnelly.
Yes.
The selection of the subcontractors was your responsibility, correct?
It was supposed to, but not.
But how
the
could
consultant will bring who they want, when they want, how they want.
But you were the one who had to work with them.
Yes.
And the quality of their work also reflects the quality of your work.
Yes.
At any point in time, did you put up opposition to any of the subcontractors working under your firm? Were you comfortable with them all?
I will say yes, because I know how to adjust myself. There was never a problem between my company and the subcontractors.
Were you comfortable with the amount of money paid under your contracts to the subcontractors through the project consultant?
That I will not, I had no say in that. They will just, I'll just see a certificate for $400,000, $280,000, $175,000, $600,000 for Tom, Dick, or Harry. I don't have to mention company's name, but the 14 subcontractors or companies that was under my umbrella were getting paid directly from Halco, and the amount, I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, but Mr. Donnelly, you also received 5% off of everything that they were paid. So you were just as culpable as Halco and them.
Because of, we had to do what you call in contractors assistant. We'll assist them if they need scaffolding, if they need props. If they do a mess, we have to pass and clean it.
The audit report also says that within a 5-month period between May 2011 and October 2011, your company was paid $28 million in contracts in an election year.
Yes.
That came up as a red flag. The world has it that Cyril Donnelly is a go flambeau.
Yes.
Tell us, why was your company awarded such large contracts in an election year?
What year was that?
2011.
Where did that money come from? I don't know. What the job was for?
It was for contract number 3 and 4.
Here? Yes. All right, well, whatever $20 or $30 million that was passed under my name or my company's name for the duration from start to finish, Cyril Donnelly Construction only received $12.4, $12.2 million. I'm not exact the amount on the 12 million. So I cannot understand where that 20 million is coming from. Yes, $40+ million passed under Cyril Donnelly Construction name. But what we received actually was only 12-point-something million. They were using Cyril Donnelly Construction name to do whatever they choose to do.
Who is they?
Conrad Emmanuel and whoever else that was managing the project. Those that was approving the monies to be paid were using my company as a passport, an umbrella to shade their hot suns.
You were responsible for procuring the equipment that would be fitted into the hospital, correct?
Yes.
Right. Did you select the companies who were suitably qualified to get the required equipment for the hospital?
No, not at all. I was never even called or involved in discussion. All I will know that there will be a container with generators or whatever equipment. We have to offload it or a place to place it.
Was there anybody from the Ministry of Health directly involved in the procurement process through your construction firm or the project engineer or anybody on the ground?
I don't know, because these things were unknown to me.
But they were being paid from your purse, and you were getting 5% of everything that they bought.
It is true. But the project here was going according to how the project manager and the consultant want, not according to construction rules.
Under your contract, $127,000 odd, I believe around that figure, was paid for landscaping at St. Jude construction site. Mr. Donnelly, does this look like a site deserving of landscaping?
There were a time when there was quite a lot of bush. A company came at least once or twice, spending about, I'll say, a week each time to cut down the bush. I don't know at what cost they did it, because I was never told, neither involved.
But you got 5%. You got 5% of $128,000.
I am repeating myself to tell you, Halco and Shanta King was doing what they want, and I would never involve. They would just pay me whatever they feel like paying me. And that is why when I told the Prime Minister on several occasions that I would like to have a meeting with him pertaining to the project, He never take me on.
Coming up,
I cannot account for that, sir.
things heat up. During the research phase for this documentary, Untold Stories spoke with Irma Louis, who was the accountant for the Ministry of Economic Development, who admitted being bewildered as to the anomalies with the payment arrangements. But her concerns were echoed from various sections, and our questions relating to this very unconventional payment procedure were dodged by everyone, from the Director of Finance, Coinfia Thomas, to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Development, Tracy Polius, and even the former Minister of Finance, Dr. Kenny Anthony. There was a bespoke model of payment for this project.
The what?
A bespoke, a one-of-a-kind model of payment for this project, where the project, the contractor, the main contractor, had photocopies of payment authorization handed to the project consultant, and the project consultant then would hire his approved subcontractors who would be paid directly through the main contractor through the Ministry of Finance. You, as Minister of Finance, have you ever come across such a model?
I cannot account for that model of payment. It was a model adopted by the technocrats. I cannot account for it.
But you are Minister of Finance.
My responsibility is to approve the finances necessary for the project.
But sir, you are the Minister of Finance, directly responsible for handling
I do not get involved. I do not get involved in those details.
Sir, but it is your responsibility.
No minister gets involved in such details. You approve the resources for the project. The funds are allocated through the appropriation. Once that is done, it is the responsibility of the accounting officer within the department to ensure that all the checks and balances are put in place.
But
I don't get involved in those details.
Sir, but can I tell you that the Constitution of St. Lucia gives you that responsibility and these powers?
Oh yes, and it does. But I don't get involved in those details. There are technicians whose responsibilities include ensuring that they conform to the Finance Act. And that's their responsibility. And if you read the Finance Act, not the Constitution, it will instruct you appropriately.
It deviates from the Finance Act. That bespoke model of payment deviates from proper project management and it deviates from the Finance Act. And we've established that.
Okay.
FCIB 89 and also the model which they were using, which was the 1999 model, both of them were, this project was outside the realms of both of them. As Minister of Finance, how were you not able to ensure that the cost for repairing this hospital, wing by wing, there was adequate supervision from your office to the Permanent Secretary for Economic Affairs, the project manager, right down the line? It is your responsibility because the buck starts and stops with you.
All measures were put in place, sir. All measures were put in place. There was a consultancy group, HALCRO. There was a project manager appointed to manage the project with the consultant, and of course the Ministry of Finance providing the necessary oversight.
Players were so involved, Mr. King. How were we able to order millions of dollars worth of equipment?
I cannot account for that, sir.
That did not meet the specifications of that particular hospital.
I cannot account for that, sir. I answered your question.
How could we have
my answer to your question is that all of the stakeholders were involved in the process.
Okay.
I cannot account, I do not get involved in details within any ministry. I don't instruct myself. I don't advise myself. I don't get involved in procurement. I don't get involved in technical issues. I'm a policy maker.
You approve the payments for these projects. As the person approving the payments to these projects, do you have a microscopic view of why the people of St. Lucia, through you, are paying these monies for a particular task? And more importantly, is the task that they're paying for accomplished?
There are systems in government which deals with all of that. No prime minister, no minister goes in with a microscope or any instrument whatsoever attempting to micromanage any ministry. We all have our responsibilities.
For 5 years, you were in opposition.
Yeah.
Looking back at this, was there anything that you thought you could have done differently?
Looking back? Well, you know, early on I spoke of in the fog of war. We all look back sometimes and say, we could have done it differently. We could have said, let us hold back and wait. Let us wait until the hospital, professional, proven hospital designers get here. Let us hold back until we get a contractor who has a track record of building hospitals in the EU and in North America. Let us hold back and make sure we get the biomedical engineers who can come in and give us all of the perfect designs and get the perfect institution built. We could have said that. We could have said that. But you know, in a time of disaster, we do what we can possibly do to bring things back to normal.
Do you believe that you succumb to public pressure to go the wrong way?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And do you believe that the way that you did it was the textbook way to do it and the correct way?
Absolutely not, sir. I didn't succumb to public pressure. I didn't succumb to pressure. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We had to get on with the project, and we got on with it.
Even if it was not the international way, even if it was not the proper procurement way?
This is your perception.
There were no approved plans. A man building a shack by the road has to have approved plans.
This is your
We're
perception.
building a hospital
and I
without
hope we don't
approved
continue
plans.
along this line. Let us move on.
Really?
Let us move on, sir. I would imagine that you would be interviewing a number of other people who were more involved after I left, who can probably inform you as to what were the hurdles, why the hospital wasn't open.
Join us for part 2 of Untold Stories, the St. Jude Reconstruction Project, as we move from 2011 right up to 2017. We speak directly to the people who walked away with millions of taxpayer dollars. We find the policy makers who continued the sequence of unfortunate events. We track down the famous Mandish, Singh and Conrad Emanuel. And we review the technical audit and bring you up to date with the malaise of construction errors on the St. Jude site. We sit with the present minister as he charts the way forward, and we home in on who or what is to be blamed for this $180 million disaster, disguised as St. Jude, the patron saint of lost causes.
The fool has never been told. Could go on and on, the fool has never been told. Could go on and on, the fool has never been told. Could go on and on, the fool has never been told. Could go on and on, the fool has never been told. Could go on and on, the fool has never been